Jay here of Stretford Paddock, and this is a one-on-one interview with an old friend of the channel, Kieran Maguire from The Price of Football. We thought we'd get him on to tell us a little bit about these latest financial reports from Manchester United. What exactly do they mean? Is it bad news? It doesn't look great reading, but we thought Kieran would come on and explain it to laymen like me. Kieran, good to see you. How's everything going?
Keeping busy, RJ. The world of football finance has sort of exploded. But you were with me from the very start, so you've been part of that nonsense for a long time with me, haven't you?
Yeah, you've been chatting to us for a few years now, and I remember I always quote you about this. I don't know, it might have been about 3 or 4 years ago. You telling us about some bloke called Jim Ratcliffe. Said keep an eye on him. I remember you telling me keep an eye on Sir Jim Ratcliffe. Don't take the notice of that bid for Chelsea. He could end up coming in for Manchester United, and you were right, and the rest is history. Bit of a mixed bag in terms of the response we've had about Sir Jim Ratcliffe, but we'll get into a little bit of that. The latest financial reports came out this week for Manchester United. I think one of the sort of top lines we saw was around 1.3 billion in debt overall. You know, I mean, from a fan point of view, that looks really worrying. How worried should we be about the amount of debt that Manchester United are in?
I think you need to split the debt into sort of three parts. First of all, is that how much do they owe to the banks? And they owe the banks around about $750 million, certainly well over 700 mil. And that sounds quite scary, but those loans don't have to be repaid. So it's, you know, effectively they're interest only, a lot of them. Part of that is due to they got about $650 million of loans, and the rest is an overdraft. The only thing that's made me slightly twitchy was in the first quarter, when what we're looking at here is 1st of July to the 30th of June, that they borrowed another 100 mil. And you're going, well, you know, the Glazers aren't spending it on Old Trafford, as we know. You know, the investment in Carrington has taken place. So what's it been gone for? And it has been used to fund transfers. So, you know, that can be seen as a positive. That if they buy the right players, then you'll get a return on the investment in terms of, you know, qualifying for the Champions League, winning more trophies, and getting back to where United used to be.
Yeah, you mentioned the Glazers there, and I think they saw that the debt from the takeover is still around 480 million. I think it's been around a similar figure for quite some time. Is this something that's just going to be around forever? Do you think this is ever going to go away, this Glazer debt? Because it just seems to, I don't know, the needle doesn't seem to move very much with it all.
It's long-term borrowings, Jay, and I can understand the frustration of United fans, because the only club that's borrowed more is Spurs, but at least Spurs can say, well, look, we've got this big shiny stadium. We've got something for it. What have you got from the Glazers? There's been nothing invested in Old Trafford. You know, I started going to Old Trafford in 1980. That's when I moved to Manchester, and it was a bit rickety then, and some of the things when I go as an away fan now, they've not changed.
No, I agree. And listen, I love Old Trafford because of the memories I've got there and the nostalgia I have towards it, and I've had some of the best moments of my life in that stadium. But I do understand why I think we need a new stadium. I've been saying that for a little while now. Do you think, when you look at the latest finances, does that affect anything in terms of the plans for the new stadium, or is that completely separate from what we've seen this week?
No, I think the funding for the new stadium will be completely independent. I mean, in an ideal world, you'd get rid of some of that Glazer debt, but let's face it, the Glazers aren't ever going to pay it back. The club doesn't have enough cash it's generating itself, because that gets reinvested in the squad, and that's where you want to see it as a fan. So it will be a hangover. I think the big unanswered question is that the club's been very coy as to how they're going to fund the new stadium. There's been talk about these seat licenses as one way, but that won't pay for a lot of it. It'll make a contribution. Do INEOS have spare cash? Looking at their finances, probably not. Is Jim Ratcliffe going to put some of his wealth in? You know, that would be the ideal world, but again, you talk to a few people, they say, well, most of his wealth sort of tied up in shares in INEOS, so he wouldn't necessarily do that. So it is a concern. There's no doubt about it, and I think there's a fear, and you know, you as a hardcore Red will probably know this, is that they're going to try to get it back as soon as the new stadium opens by upping the seat prices and squeezing out all of those what I call hardcore Reds. You know, I used to live in Wally Range. I used to walk to Old Trafford, even though I was not a United fan. It was still going to, I go and watch United one week, City the next, and so on. I'm just a big football fan. I played cricket for Trafford Cricket Club, and all of my mates are from, Gorton and Urmston and so on. These people are being squeezed out, just as if we're seeing with the World Cup. The hardcore England fans won't be able to go and watch England in the World Cup next year because the prices are berserk. So that's my concern. They'll say, "Oh, it's costing us a fortune, therefore we're going to rinse the fans."
You're definitely an honorary Mancunian there, Kieran, with those credentials, Gorton and Urmston and playing for Trafford. No, that is a massive concern. A lot of fans. I remember speaking to you a few years ago about Sir Jim Ratcliffe, and you spoke about sort of his legacy almost, how he'd be looking at that at his age. Do you still feel that way about Sir Jim Ratcliffe? Do you think that he would have that attitude of almost wanting to be remembered as the guy that sort of turned things around for Manchester United? Is that the indication you get with the moves that he's making, or do you think that's still up in the air?
I think there is still an element of that. He is a very confident man, shall we say, but he wants other people to praise him the way that he praises himself, and the way of achieving that is to create an iconic memory. And as you rightly say, Old Trafford will always be in your memories. So what are they going to call it? If it's going to call it New Old Trafford, whatever it is, it's always going to be in the memories of fans. And I always say that top 10 memories of my life, 6 of them involve football. Doesn't mean that I don't love my wife. Doesn't mean that I don't remember the birth of my kids. And when I say to the missus, you're number 4. That means that you're better than that goal by Pascal Gross in Europe. You should be proud of that, and she doesn't seem to think that that's good value. So I think he will. He wants to be remembered for something positive, and as you sort of hinted at earlier, the reaction of United fans to the first couple of years of INEOS was that there was a big feeling of goodwill, and a lot of that's evaporated, partly due to what we've seen on the pitch, partly due to what we've seen off the pitch. As anybody who's based in Manchester, you'll have friends, you'll have colleagues potentially who have been impacted by the redundancies, and that's had an impact on these financial results. And then there's issues to do with pricing and disabled tickets and so on, which don't necessarily reflect INEOS in a particularly favourable light.
No, not at all. And you're completely right. I do know people who work at United or have worked at United who've lost their jobs or been sort of made to feel unwelcome. Just the culture there seems to have changed. Do you think this has had an effect from what we've seen with these financial results? Some of the moves that he's made in terms of redundancies, in terms of cuts, have we seen anything positive in terms of the finances from these moves?
The wage bill is down, and people will say, well, hold on, last year they were in the Europa League, this year they're not. I get to see player contracts. I'm not saying whether I've seen player contracts at United or not. I can't. But I know that the big clubs, shall we say, that they only give bonuses to players for participation in the Champions League. So being in the Europa League and not being in the Europa League won't make a dime difference in terms of player wages. So the wage bill overall is down. So that will be partly due to the likes of Sancho, Rashford, Sancho, Garnacho, not being on payroll. So that would have been the big fact. But also, if you get rid of 400 people, and let's say that they're paid an average of 30 grand a year, that's 12 million pounds a year off your wage bill. It's not a huge proportion, but it is a contributory factor. So that helps Manchester United in terms of compliance with PSR and SCR and all of these ludicrous cost control measures. And if that money is spent wisely, and it is an if, I think the jury's out in terms of INEOS's ability to recruit good players, then that can be a positive because it means that more can be invested on the pitch. If, however, it's frittered away, or if you end up getting rid of people and then effectively having to get a consultants in to do their job, then it's money that's wasted.
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned there about players and wages, and I know from the conversations I've had with fans already since these reports came out, a lot of the questions are, how does this affect us in terms of buying players, in terms of competing for player wages. Say we went for, just as an example, Elliot Anderson, and we were going up against a City or an Arsenal. Would Manchester United be able to compete in terms of the transfer fee and the wages? Do you still think Manchester United will be able to do that based on what you've seen?
Yes, I mean, what Manchester United have to do is to use the exit door to a much smarter extent than they have done in recent years. There's been too many players who have left at their end of their contracts for nothing. There have been too many players who Manchester United have bought who haven't met expectations and therefore have had to be sold or loaned out, and you've not really recovered the fee. I mean, I did my sums. I think for every £1 that Manchester United have made in player sales over the last sort of 10 to 12 years, Chelsea have made around about five. And you know, all of the advantage that Manchester United have got, you know, bigger stadium, bigger fan base, bigger commercial appeal, you know, all of those positives have been thrown away because of an inability to sell players. And that's partly due to the fact that, you know, as an outsider, Manchester United is what you'd call a destination club. You know, if there's not many places higher to go. You know, once you got to Old Trafford, Real Madrid, arguably. But where else in the world are players really wanting to go? So it does mean that when players arrive, that they're not in a hurry to leave, and I think we've seen that with some of the signings where you think, well, the player might want to move on, but then you hear on the grapevine, I want to stay, and it's absolutely understandable. This is Manchester United we're talking about, and that is such a positive can act in a bit of a negative. So I think one of the really good things from these accounts is that Manchester United are now generating far more money. You know, the £45 million of profit in this quarter account, yeah, mainly from the sale of Garnacho, I would imagine, does make an impact, and actually makes far more of an impact than saving £7 million on the wage bill.
No, I agree with you completely. It's a bit of a bugbear for a lot of United fans is our inability to move players on at the right time. We obviously overspend on a lot of players, and then when we do try and move them on, we struggle, and it's obviously cost us. And the stats you said there about for every £1 we've made, Chelsea made five, speaks volumes. Another sort of takeaway line from the financial reports was about the credit facility. The borrowing on the credit facility is up. I know I sort of repeat myself here, but again, what does that mean? Is that something that fans should be looking at? Should we be worried about that? Does it matter?
No, it's effectively an overdraft limit. You know, Manchester United have borrowed money on the overdraft, but I think they probably can borrow up to a further £60 million. Now, as anybody that's ever had an overdraft will know, just because you can borrow doesn't mean that you should. You know, it's the same with a credit card. If your credit card company puts up your limit, it's the limit. As I always say to Mrs. M, it's not a target. You don't get a prize if you hit it. So, yeah, I'd be happy in the way that it shows that banks have got so much confidence in Manchester United that they are willing to increase that limit. So that's the size of the stature. That's the size of the banks don't perceive Manchester United as being low risk. And perhaps that can therefore be an indicator that Manchester United should be able, if they go down the route of borrowing for the new stadium, they should be able to borrow at reasonably competitive rates. The problem is that, you know, Spurs borrowed in 2016 at 2.5%, 3%. It's going to be far higher for Manchester United in 26, 27, 28 because global interest rates are up. But at least you're not paying people are saying, well, they're looking a bit dodgy and therefore we're going to go and charge them a credit card rate. So I think I would see this as a positive that if the banks are confident in Manchester United, then they're going to be willing to lend further.
That makes a lot of sense. Just a couple more questions before I let you go. Just how important, I know this sounds like a silly question, but I'll ask it anyway. How important do you think it is for Manchester United to get back into Europe in terms of the finances? Because it's still up in the air whether we're going to. There's a chance we could do. We don't know. Obviously, last season was a bit of a shocker because usually Manchester United expects us to at least be in the Europa, and we didn't make any European competition. How important do you think, just from a financial point of view, it is for Manchester United to get back into those competitions?
I would say Conference League is actually worth avoiding because if you get into the Conference League, I don't know whether you've seen these new rules, but under the new UEFA rules, you can only spend effectively £70 on wages for every £100 that comes through the door. Now, to be fair to United, they're pretty below that anyway. But you don't really make money from the conference, and even for a club of the stature of Manchester United, if you are the hospitality or the commercial marketing department, and you've got I don't know, 120, 150 boxes to fill, if it's the third best team in Albania that's coming to OT on a Thursday night, you're gonna struggle. Europa League. You look at the Europa League. Yeah, you got some fantastic teams there. So you can charge more for ticket prices. You can charge more for hospitality. The prize money is twice the amount of prize money that you get in the conference. So that's a positive. And of course, as you saw, yeah, last year Manchester United were 90 minutes away from the Champions League through participation in the Europa League. So I think there are positives, and you will make money because a club the size of Manchester United doesn't. They will get 75,000 people turning up for Europa League matches. Champions League, however, Jay, is where it's at. You're getting a minimum of £40 million just for opening the door. You get 2 million for every €2 million for every victory. You get 700,000 euro just for a draw. So a good year in the Champions League, you factor in really good gate receipts because, well, again, I'm not going to praise or criticise INEOS here. If you've got group matches against Real Madrid and Bayern Munich, you're going to be charging, full price, shall we say? So the gate receipts will be very high. There's no reason why, if Manchester United go to the get to the final, they can't be. You'd be looking at potentially 150 million quid in total from everything. Now, some of that will go on players' wages and so on. You win the tournament, and again, I'm not a fan of it, but look at it from a money point of view. You now win the Champions League, and you're in the next FIFA Club World Cup. Well, Chelsea walked away with 80 million quid for a tournament which nobody watched. And again, that goes back into your player budget. So yes, Europe is important. I think you're absolutely right. Europa League should be a minimum ambition, but Champions League really where it is at. And you've got to be able to run to stay still to a certain extent, because who do Manchester United benchmark themselves against? You benchmark yourselves against Real Madrid and Juventus and Barcelona and PSG and so on, and they're there 10 years out of 10. Yeah, that's what you've got to be aiming for, rather than the sort of the at present. If we'd had this conversation 15 years ago, and we said, well, yeah, we hope that Manchester United might get into the Champions League, you smack me in the chops. You go, come on, Kieran, what are you smoking, man? This is United. We should be there every single year.
Yeah. Yeah, unfortunately, it's no longer the case, isn't it? Just finally, Kieran, does it make sense what you're seeing with INEOS and the finances? Can you see what they're trying to do? Does it make sense? Do you think it is moving in the right direction, or is it too soon to tell? Because a lot of the decisions have been quite unpopular, as you touched on earlier. I think it's still early doors in terms of the football side of things. We've not really seen any improvement. We finished 15th last season, and we're sort of, a little bit better this season, but hardly setting the world alight. So, in terms of just the finances, does it make sense what INEOS are trying to do, or do you think we're still in the sort of wait and see era?
I think it is wait and see. I mean, if it was a chemicals company that we were talking about, if it was a plastic parts factory, then you'd probably say, yeah, this is standard business practice. My big reservation with INEOS is that Manchester United, ultimately, it's a people company, and if you don't treat people well, they'll still do their job, but when people are working under conditions of fear of losing their jobs, they don't necessarily go that extra mile for the right reasons. So that's my reservation. Does that feed through to the players? Yeah, the players are effectively inoculated from 90%, 99% of what's happening at the rest of the club. But I know that I get some stories. Some of the people at Manchester United, in terms of the players, you should be so proud of for the work that they are doing behind the scenes. And if they're picking up negative things, that will get passed around the dressing room. It's not going to be the difference between nutmegging 3 defenders and sticking a worldie in from 35 yards and not doing it, but getting everybody rowing in the same direction, I think, is useful. And I don't think INEOS have achieved that. And a climate of fear and bullying, which is what you hear. Again, I've spoken to people who used to be there, and of course they're not necessarily going to say positive things if you lost your job, but it doesn't really represent the values that I would associate with Manchester United. And we grew up, well, sorry, I grew up in sort of the back end of Matt Busby's era and so on, and you go, well, that's not, or even Sir Alex. You wouldn't think that Sir Alex would be over keen on that either.
No, I completely agree, and it saddens me when I hear those stories and I speak to people. And United have always been this sort of weird entity in the sense that we're a bit of always felt like a family club, yet we're one of the biggest clubs in the world. And I feel we're losing a little bit of that, and it is kind of deflating. And at the very least, you say, okay, we might be losing that, but at least we look like we're very strong financially, or we're doing the business on the football pitch. But at the minute, that isn't really happening. So yeah, it is a bit of a testing time for Manchester United fans. So hopefully things will turn around. Kieran, it's always great chatting to you. I appreciate you coming on the channel. You've always been a big supporter of the channel, and we do appreciate you. Make sure you go and check out Kieran Maguire, The Price of Football. I know you've got a busy day talking about World Cup tickets and all the rest of it, which I'm going to be honest with you, most United fans probably don't care about. So we'll leave you to do that for other media. But thanks for coming on the channel, Kieran. Big shout out to you. Much appreciated.
Cheers. Keep up the great work, Jay.
So that was Kieran Maguire from The Price of Football, explaining a little bit about those financial results we saw this week. Not exactly great news, was it? If we're being honest, I think we could all see that. But I think the jury's out is the sort of main takeaway line there. Let me know what you think. Get involved in the chat in the comments. What do you think about it all? Do you have the same concerns that many of us do in terms of where Manchester United are going, in what direction we're moving in? Are you feeling pretty confident? Want to know what you think. Don't forget as well to hit like, share and subscribe. This has been a one-on-one interview. I'm Jay Marty. Thanks for watching.